Good morning, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Singapore International Cyber Week 2024. My name is Wayne Chan, and it's my pleasure to be your host on this beautiful morning. Now, we have an exciting lineup of international panelists here at this high-level panel on AI to share their perspectives. And today's theme is, can AI be more secure? Or can AI be secure, rather? Now, AI is no longer a concept of the future. It is very much our present reality. AI is being integrated into our daily lives and into critical infrastructure at an unprecedented pace. Much has already been said about how AI can benefit industries and how it can be used for public good. However, it is also critical for us to understand and manage the potential risks. This will ensure that AI is safe, secure, and trustworthy. Now, this morning session will delve into an area that is not well understood: AI security. Our distinguished panel of international experts from government, industry, and academia will explore the intricate landscape of AI security and discuss how stakeholders should work together to safeguard the development, deployment, and use of AI. Without further ado, to start the session by sharing a few words on this topic, please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Senior Minister of State at the Ministry of Digital Development and Information, and also the Ministry of Health, Dr. Janil Puthucheary.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and it's my pleasure to be with you at this high-level panel on artificial intelligence. Can AI be secure? This is a question that many of us have grappled with, more so since the explosion of ChatGPT into our consciousness in 2022. But it's been relevant to our work in government, in industry, in academia, and it's relevant to us as users, relevant to our trust in the adoption of AI. We are concerned with whether AI can be made safe, can be made secure, can be a force for good. Many of our partners and friends have hosted international discussions on this topic in the past 2 years, and Singapore has been an active participant in the space, building on our existing work on AI governance. In 2023, we joined our counterparts at the AI Safety Summit hosted by the UK. This was an important milestone in dialogues on AI safety and security across borders. November last year, Singapore was also invited to co-seal the guidelines for secure AI system development, developed by the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre and the US's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. This document outlines the principles that system owners should use to guide their decision-making about AI and their frameworks for AI safety. This year, for AI safety, Singapore has launched a Model AI governance framework for generative AI, following an international consultation process. This is the first comprehensive framework for the governance of generative AI. It has 9 dimensions considered within it to ensure that these models are seen and addressed in totality. In addressing emerging technologies, these are the sorts of critical conversations we need to have. Technologies like cloud computing, artificial intelligence, quantum computing promise significant benefits to our industries, to our economies. However, we must be clear-eyed about the risks and how we will manage them, rather than learn the lessons the hard way, subsequently try to play catch-up, patch the vulnerabilities that we discover through crisis and something going wrong. This is why we've made trust a core principle, a core part of Singapore's plan for what we have called Smart Nation 2.0. All users, large organizations, individuals, must be able to trust that technology, including emerging technology, will be secure and reliable, that their safety and that their well-being are assured, because this provides the confidence to try new use cases and deploy new technologies in the next bound of growth. And this feeds into some of our larger aims in developing this Smart Nation 2.0 plan, what we can do for our communities, what we can do to grow our society and our opportunities. So this is not just about growth and productivity. Those are necessary outcomes. But this is also about implementing AI well. We know that we must adopt a higher standard for safety and security of AI in certain domains, such as healthcare, for example, to address key risks. We must protect our AI systems against malicious cyber attacks. We know threat actors can insert backdoors into open source AI components. Final models can be manipulated, can be disrupted. Threat actors can mount classical attacks on the software supporting AI. The old risks haven't gone away. They've just been added to. So these systems all need to be updated, they need to be patched, they need to be kept secure. We must protect AI models against attempts to extract data. And all of these are necessary efforts to strengthen long-term trust in AI-based solutions. And this requires close partnership between service providers, industry players, and public sector technology partners, such as we have in Singapore, Synapse, our healthcare technology agency, and the Government Technology Agency of Singapore, GovTech. AI has grown in many sectors. AI adoption has grown in many sectors and across our entire ecosystem. So therefore, it's not just the sector-specific risks, we also face systemic risks. These have come to the fore in our thinking, and this is really an international challenge that we have to tackle together. If there are disruptions to key parts of our critical AI infrastructure, many companies can lose access to their models, their tools, their services, and users will find it difficult to continue with their activities if they've built their model, their business model, their process model around AI, and the AI solutions have been interrupted. Efforts to repair and restore these services can take time, depending on the security and resilience measures that are in place. And as this happens, it affects many people regardless of where they reside and where the AI models have been deployed. This is why it must be a priority for us to make AI secure and trustworthy. These are the necessary conditions for AI adoption, and we need to take practical steps to provide a base of trust. Having painted the glass half empty picture, actually we are seeing quite a lot of progress. There is a lot of AI adoption across the globe at an increasing pace. This is now the glass half full. In some countries, we are seeing AI adoption in critical infrastructure. Now, we know that this increases many classical cybersecurity risks. This can affect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of AI. And, as I've explained, there are new risks unique to AI models and systems, which are not well understood. But we are not starting from zero. AI security is relatively nascent compared to the classical cybersecurity, but there are many existing efforts to help developers put the right guardrails in place, secure their models, secure their systems, and the many conversations that I've highlighted are part of this process. But the examples continue. The US National Institute of Standards and Technology has released an AI risk management framework. This will help users to manage their potential AI risks. The Ministry of Science and Technology in South Korea has also announced its plans to make AI more safe, secure, and trustworthy in its strategy to realize trustworthy AI. Yesterday, at the SICW opening ceremony, Senior Minister Teo Chee Hean announced that the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore is publishing our first edition of our Guidelines and Companion Guide for Securing AI. And these guidelines set out key evergreen principles that system owners should use to guide their approach to the security of AI, including how they implement security controls and best practices. This companion guide is a community effort to provide system owners with practical measures and controls. It's not meant to be prescriptive, but is a resource to support system owners to navigate this nascent space. I'd like to thank our international partners, industry players, and professionals for their comments. We've received positive feedback on the initial draft, along with suggestions on how to improve it. We've taken effort to address this feedback, and we've put the documents out as a community-led resource. We hope to continue working together to make AI more secure in practice. I'm also pleased to announce that CSA has worked with Resaro, a Singaporean company in the AI assurance space, to co-author a paper on AI security risks. This paper explores what security of AI means and discusses the role that all stakeholders should play in this space. The guidelines, the companion guide, and this discussion paper are all linked on the card that you may have seen on your seats. So there's 2 QR codes there. Sometimes we have to go a little bit old school to persuade you to go and read the document. And then we've also got the physical document here. But it's all available online, the paper as well as the companion guide and the guidelines. We are also developing our local community of cybersecurity professionals to discover new techniques for securing AI. For example, from July to September, Singapore hosted a global challenge for safe and secure large language models, LLMs. This challenge saw more than 300 international participants developing robust security measures and innovative approaches to mitigate jailbreaking attempts on LLMs, to make them more secure. We had more than 100 teams in this challenge, including groups from China, Germany, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, and the United States. And this is a reflection of the global effort to tackle the challenges of AI. Our top teams are in the audience with us today. Please join me in congratulating them and thanking them for their effort to make AI more secure. We will have the panel discussion after this, and after the panel discussion, the winners will receive their prizes. Please stay on and congratulate them and support them and encourage them for the great work that they have done, and which we will encourage them to keep on doing. The panel today is an important opportunity for us, as government officials, to have an open dialogue with industry professionals, together with researchers, and explore how AI can be made more secure. I look forward to our panelists' comments on the key measures we should prioritize and what has been most effective so far. More importantly, I look forward to how the dialogue can discuss how stakeholders should continue to work together and improve their relationships across government agencies, vendors, system owners, industry players, and users to safeguard the development, deployment, and the use of AI. Everyone has a stake in building trust in AI. We're in this together. And we're at a critical period for the development, deployment, and adoption of AI, and we will work together to address these issues early, across sectors, and across jurisdictions. Thank you very much for inviting me to be with you today. I wish you all a very fruitful session and a wonderful Cyber Week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senior Minister of State, Dr. Janil, for your insightful sharing. And now, while we wait for the stage to be ready, let me share some background about the Singapore International Cyber Week. Now organized by the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, the Singapore International Cyber Week is the Asia-Pacific's most established cybersecurity event. Now, CSA is Singapore's national authority for cybersecurity and plays a pivotal role in Singapore's smart nation and digital economy ambitions. The 9th edition of the SICW will take place from 14th to 17th October 2024 at the Sands Expo and Convention Center here in Singapore, under the theme of Trust and Security in the Digital Era SICW 2024 will explore the impact of digital developments on the global multilateral order and how security can be developed to enable trust in the digital and cyberspace. Now, the event brings together policymakers, industry leaders, and top academia from across the world to exchange best practices and strengthen international cooperation on topics ranging from harnessing digital opportunities and tackling cyber challenges, the evolution of cyberspace and cybersecurity policy, the implementation of cyber norms, as well as security in the Internet of Things and operational technology space. And now, let us invite our panelists for this afternoon. First of all, we have Mr. Rod Latham, Director for Cybersecurity and Digital Identity, DSID. And he's joined by Léonard Hollande, Head of International Cyber Policy, French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We also have Mr. Chris Hawkins, Chief Technology Officer, IBM Security Asia Pacific. And Dr. Evan Miyazono, Chief Executive Officer, Atlas Computing. Now, this panel will be moderated by Dr. He Min, Chief AI Officer and Deputy Government Chief Digital Technology Officer from the Ministry of Digital Development and Information, Singapore. And without further ado, Dr. He, over to you.
Thank you very much. Senior Minister of State, Dr. Janil Puthucheary, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here today. As Dr. Janil mentioned, AI has captured the world's imagination over the past 2 years, both in terms of its opportunities as well as its risks. These include the risks from AI, hallucination, bias, inaccuracies, fake news, and the risks that AI may kill us all. But there are also the risks to AI, and hence the question of the security of AI. This leads us to the theme of today's panel, Can AI be secure? It's our privilege to have 4 very distinguished panelists with us today. Mr. Rod Latham is the Director of Cybersecurity and Digital Identity of the United Kingdom's Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. He is responsible for driving improvements in the UK's cybersecurity, resilience, and skills space, and supporting the creation of a safe and thriving digital identity market. I hear that he would rather be at a good game of football right now or exploring early medieval history, so thank you for being here with us today. Mr. Léonard Roland is the Head of International Cybersecurity Policy at the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He was a French expert during the negotiations of the United Nations Cyber Report in 2015, and has also served as a political advisor at the French Embassy in Moscow and Berlin, where he covered security-related issues, including cyber. I asked him what he would like to be known as, and he said, I want to be known as the diplomat in the room. So thank you for coming. I think it broadens the conversation significantly. Mr. Chris Hawkins is the CTO for IBM Security Asia Pacific, having joined IBM from the acquisition of a startup that pioneered online web authentication. He once traveled to 250 countries in 25 years and has 45 patents under his belt. Way 45 more than me. Dr. Evan Miyazono is the CEO of Atlas Computing, a nonprofit mapping and prototyping ways to scale human review and provable safety of advanced AI. He previously built the research grants and meta science teams at Protocol Labs, the company that initially created IPFS and Filecoin, many of you will be familiar with. He holds a PhD in applied physics from Caltech, developing hardware for a secure quantum internet. I understand that he loves going to uncrowded beaches with clear water, sunny skies, and good surf. So let's get the panel going so that Evan can go to his beach soon. Let me begin with the first set of questions around comparing securing AI versus securing traditional IT systems. Evan, what is new about AI, and why should we be concerned about the security risks of AI?
So as many of you may know, AI has been with us for a very long time. You may have been following the Nobel Prize in Physics. Hopfield and Hinton got the Nobel Prize for work that they did in the 80s. But if you've been looking only at the high level of capabilities that have been showing up, these have largely come from the fact that transformers have allowed one architecture to kind of rule them all, where anyone can contribute parallelized learning data that they can use to improve capabilities of AI systems. And one breakthrough in the field of computer vision could dramatically improve breakthroughs and drive breakthroughs in fields like text synthesis, where previously those were essentially completely different subfields. People didn't go to each other's conferences, and now it's sort of been really unified. I think that in terms of security risks, it's really interesting to think about how you can break this down into, there's a risk that AI does what we want it to do, and the user wants to do something bad with it, or the creator of the AI system wants to do something that society doesn't generally agree with, or the AI does things that we don't intend for it to do. And if we look at things where, in the first category, the user is trying to do things that society may not want, you'll hear terms like prompt injections or data poisoning or adversarial attacks. You can get training data out of these systems sometimes. You can get them to violate rules that you thought you've given them pretty deterministically. And all of these things create fairly new threat vectors. And in terms of bad things that people might want to do with models, you can also imagine that even though the information that these models are trained on is a large fraction of what is available on the internet, and usually not much more than that. And so you can frequently raise the claim, these models aren't creating new risks for cybersecurity or biorisk or nuclear technology because all that information was already on the internet. But a lot of the benchmarks that you have to pay attention to for things like biorisk is not what do I combine to create a superflu, but how do I craft an email to someone who is selling the requisite components to convince them that I am also a researcher working on this, and that's more or less a natural language problem. And current models are already getting to the point where they can start posing these problems to people who would otherwise be restraining access to these dangerous materials or dangerous insider secrets or trade secrets.
Thank you, Evan. So I'm hearing it's the proliferation, the accessibility, the unification, as well as the personalization of many of the systems that makes it quite different from the past.
Yeah, I would say it's really lowering the bar of expertise needed to.
Chris, how are these risks similar to or different from traditional IT security risks?
So first I'll say I think IBM's been in AI since that Nobel Prize. Our systems beat Kasparov in chess in the 80s, and then we won Jeopardy against the humans using Watson. So we've been tracking AI for a long time. But from a cyber perspective, outside of what I'd consider governance, which is explainability and trust and non-biased and compliance, that's one layer you have to consider. From a cyber perspective, the attacker's perspective, I'm interested in a few different parts of the equation, and these are new but not a leap in terms of what cybersecurity is addressing today. I think it's increasing the priority of the data security domain, which has largely been one that's been focused on either encryption, driven by privacy regulations or other things, right? So I think AI and quantum are the tipping point for data security investment. And there are three areas that I kind of think about, if you want to break it down into simple terms. The data, what is the data being used to tune these systems? What data was used to create the models, if that's of interest? And that data is then subjected to new angles of attack or opportunity for me as an attacker to manipulate that information, which achieves a different outcome. And the second one would be the models themselves, which was spoken about in the keynote. I'm often using those models from places that may not be trusted. So I need to understand what those models are. Like any software supply chain, that needs to be taken care of. And the third one is really the usage when, and we've addressed these situations in the past with different technology. Once you put these things on the internet to untrusted devices and users, you have a new opportunity for me as an attacker to exploit weaknesses in those. So I can extract model parameters, I can influence the way the model works. So new technology will be required. But my point would be that these are extensions to existing patterns that we've dealt with before in cyber, and I don't see that as too different. I mean, the things I'm personally concerned about, one obviously confidentiality, which is a given, but integrity. It's quite interesting that integrity has been something most of us just take for granted. Banking, healthcare, it's a priority. It's like the most important thing in security for them. The transactions and data is what it says it is because it has life-changing impacts. But I don't think there's been a time in the past where, apart from the use of social media, where widespread use of AI can produce information that is questionable. And I think integrity is something that's going to be starting to be woven into the protection mechanisms that we need to provide, but also the psychology of the people that are consuming them. We just don't want people to be receiving information that is either wrong, hallucinated, or inferred from data that's untrustworthy. So integrity is a new challenge, I think.
So models are differences arising from data models, usage, that then affect differences, integrities, assurance, etc. Rod and Leonard, what have these differences meant to your work?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for having me on the panel. In order to answer that question, I'll need to move the discussion from a technical discussion to a discussion more centered on international governance, since, as you said, I'm the only diplomat in the room. So what is our work as cyber diplomats? Our work is to set up rules of the game at international level in order to make sure that cyberspace stays stable and secure. And we have two main levers to do so. And actually, these two levers were part of the Paris Call for Trust and Security in Cyberspace back in 2018, which was adopted by 80 states. And these two levers are the following. The first one is to set up norms of behavior for states to act responsibly in cyberspace, including by securing their critical infrastructure. And the second is to make sure that there are rules for companies as well, so that they only put on the market products that are secure by design and which do not contribute to expand the attack surface. Well, these two levers, they also apply to AI security and not only to cybersecurity. Still, I would see two big differences. The first one is that the AI revolution is going so fast that sometimes we are struggling to precisely identify the risks posed by AI. And for that, we need academic research. We need to confront our findings with the industry. We need to accept that maybe sometimes industry knows better than governments about these topics. Well, we need to work hand in hand with other stakeholders globally in order to better understand that risk. And the second difference I see is that unfortunately discussions around AI safety and security are still very much a discussion for the happy few. And I really commend the SICW to have put this topic on the agenda because it serves the goal of expanding that discussion. But if you take, for instance, the network of safety institutes that is being created right now, it's still a handful of countries. So it's still very much a club discussion. So we need to expand that discussion and not to hamper the emergence of a global discussion on the topic. So to sum up, when it comes to international governance of AI security, what we need is A, to rely on academia and private sector to develop a shared understanding of risks, of common standards to develop and concrete solutions to mitigate that risk. And B, we need to propose an inclusive discussion where no country is left aside. And these are precisely two goals that we'll try to pursue in organizing our AI Action Summit that we'll be having in Paris next February.
And for myself, so as you mentioned in your introduction, I'm responsible for sort of regulation and legislation and policy in the UK system. So lightly and are not sort of technical, but looking at it through the kind of lens of government. And as we've sort of just been hearing from Chris and Evan about some of those unique security risks that AI does pose, that there are things about AI that are different. And I agree with Inard that actually, those risks are not always that well understood, and it's a very changing picture. So in the British government, we have to kind of recognise that change that we're starting to see in that level of uncertainty, and then consider what does that mean for how we adapt our overall position to cybersecurity, and then consider the duty that is on you as government for how do you protect users in your country in a proportionate manner, so there can be confidence in harnessing the benefits of AI, but done in a safe way. So for first step for us, our National Cyber Security Centre developed some guidelines that the Minister mentioned in his opening remarks, and that were co-sealed by 18 international partners, including Singapore. So in my department, we've taken those guidelines from the NCSC. We've done some kind of literary reviews, we've done risk assessments, further work, and we've developed them into a draft voluntary code of practice. The sort of thing that we could, in due course, take to develop into a global standard at a standards body like ETSI that sets baseline security requirements. And we've conducted a kind of public call for views on that draft voluntary code of practice over the summer. And we're now analysing the results that we've had from that. And we had a really positive level of engagement, both from within the UK and across the world. And that part is really important. And I think that came across in the Minister's comments. The nature of the subject means you have to have that level of international engagement. There are challenges that are, no nation, no matter how small or how big, can deal with on its own. So we're just kind of going through that at the moment, and hopefully we'll have more that we can say on that in due course. But in parallel, we've also developed a code of practice for software vendors more broadly. So this is on top of the specific one we've done on the cybersecurity of AI. And we felt we needed to do that. Obviously, you don't want to kind of overwhelm business with too much guidance, but we felt we needed that because there are things that all software vendors need to do in terms of baseline security requirements, even sort of setting aside the particular challenges of AI. And I guess I mention that in part because driving up resilience in the wider cyber ecosystem just helps strengthen us when we're dealing with AI as well.
Thanks, Rod. I summarize I'm hearing really three things, right? That really there are challenges that come from the need to balance between deployment and the risk. There's a challenge that comes from the inherent uncertainty of the risk itself. And there's a challenge that comes from taking a very inclusive approach, both making sure that your population's coming along with the journey as well as internationally. This is difficult enough if there was one person governing the system. But we all know that AI is something that the AI sausage is made by an entire factory. So given this, Chris and Rod, within an organization, whose responsibility is it to secure AI? Is it the cyber folks, the AI folks, or the practitioners, and what challenges do they face?
Well, yeah, it's a very interesting time in technology because this technology is moving faster than probably anything that I've seen in terms of adoption. Probably the internet was the last one where people just got so excited and started implementing programs of work. And security in some ways is kind of becoming the concern in these projects. So they're somewhat moving with programs of work, and they're expecting that at some point that security capabilities is there to capture some of these risks and threats that we see. And so my experience is that there's work to be done in terms of technological maturity in being able to bring solutions to address this problem at a speed that the industry is delivering AI to. And I find myself in a lot of discussions in clients where, cyber is always a shared responsibility from a perspective. The CISO often has to do the implementation, the reporting, and the policy setting, but the responsibility needs to be every single division of an organisation, accountability for it. And naturally, what happens in AI is that the chief data officer, the risk officer are key players in the discussion, CIO. So because there's a widespread impact of the outcomes of these programs at the board level, but also a lot of the information needed in order to feed the systems actually belong to different executives within an organisation. So, I think there's definitely the emerging trend is that the CISO is given a task of securing AI, but as soon as they start looking at the different problems, they start to bring in the chief data officer and the development teams, and there's just so many dependencies on groups that would otherwise may operate in silos that AI brings them together.
I agree with Chris. I think we need to guard against seeing any one particular team or individual as the one who's solely responsible for securing AI. In the same way that in an organisation, it's not just a lawyer who's responsible for the legal risk. It is something that you want an entire organisation to take responsible for. There are security risks across the entire AI supply chain. Responsibility needs to be shared by all stakeholders that sort of help and create and run an AI system. Some of those stakeholders will be in different organisations as well, and again, it just adds to that complexity, which is one of the key things that makes AI such a challenge to deal with. And again, why we've been focused on setting baseline security requirements kind of across the AI life cycle. I mentioned previously the voluntary code of practice that we're looking to develop. Within that, we set out 4 stakeholder groups, trying to kind of get your arms around that complexity. Developers, system operators, data controllers, and end users. Now we may tinker with the exact sort of terms and the definitions around those in light of some of the feedback. But I guess again the key thing for me is recognising those different levels of interest and those different people throughout the AI life cycle, and trying to recognise the different factors and supporting them. And again, just to reinforce that this is also, and I feel like I'm really preaching to the choir at Singapore International Cyber Week on this, because I don't think anyone here's, but your very presence means that you agree, I think, that this is something that you have to work with across international boundaries between governments and industry and academia. And again, that's why I think call for views have been a really important part of what we've been doing to be able to try and harness those views, and also why things like the upcoming summit in France is such an important milestone to act as a sort of convener to get everyone together, as is things like Singapore International Cyber Week.
Can I just make one additional point? I think the one thing that I've also seen is that AI also brings organisation leaders together to address a shared problem. And data is one example. So most organisations don't actually know where all their data is, who owns the data, where the duplicates are. And so the act of discovering and classifying and grouping and bringing insight into the data is a benefit to multiple stakeholders in the organisation for multiple reasons. But AI is really the trigger point to actually bring some of that budgetary requirements together to invest in a piece of work that's actually been something that's been rather nascent in the past.
So both Rod and Chris have highlighted the need to involve many different parties, many stakeholders, both within the organisation as well as across the organisations. Of course, this makes it a huge challenge, especially for governments. How do you then govern at the speed of relevance, given it's a field that's moving extremely fast? So I wanted to hear feedback from Leonard and Evan. how can governments work better with international organizations like the UN that you're a big part of, industry and academia to address the security risks from AI? What have we done well? What can we do better?
Well, speaking from a governmental perspective, I'd say our first duty is to share knowledge on how we understand risks and risk mitigation to the wider ecosystem, either public or private. This morning, the minister presented the companion guide that CSA just published, and Rod, you mentioned a similar work by NCSC. So our national agency, ANSI, a cybersecurity agency, has just published as well security recommendations for generative AI systems, which they even translated in English, which is not always the case, so I encourage you to have a look. And these guidelines aim precisely at raising awareness on the risks associated with generative AI and to promote best practices from the design and training phase of an AI model all the way through to deployment and use in production. But as I said, we also need to confront these findings, and it's a constant dialogue with other stakeholders, such as the private sector and academia. And my second point, going back to my diplomatic duty, is to try to understand what could be done, what could we do more at international level. We've seen through, for instance, the G7 Hiroshima process or the Bletchley Park process that our British friends initiated, a lot of very good work being conducting on agreeing principles for security of AI, good practices as well as voluntary commitments by companies. And we think these are essential building blocks. We also think that it's time now to go further and to act, to really deliver actions based on this initial work, and A, to turn those declarations of intent by states or companies into widely agreed standards, and B, to co-construct shared risk mitigation solutions which can benefit the wider AI community, including open source solutions. And so here again, that's the philosophy of the work we're doing preparing for the AI Action Summit.
Looking forward to a very exciting summit next February. Evan.
So I do want to say that governments have been doing things, like many things that I think are really good fits for what needs to be done. I think AI safety institutes and digital trust centers and such are exactly the kinds of response that I'm excited to see from governments and would be asking for if they weren't happening. I also think that one of the most important things that everyone in this room should be doing is trying to bolster education. I think as of a couple of weeks ago, I found out that you can use purely open source available tooling to take 10 seconds of the audio of someone's voice and clone it to say literally anything. And if everyone in this room has not told your family this, that makes everyone in your family a little bit more susceptible to fraud. And you can be the cutting edge to fight that in defense. And so I think that there are things like this, but it also can't just be education. You can also have tools. And I think watermarking as a tool is something that is really interesting in pursuing. But just because something doesn't have a watermark probably doesn't mean, if something does have a watermark, it means it was AI generated, almost certainly. But if it doesn't have a watermark, that doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't AI generated. And so we should have systems that complement that, like attestations. And so there are solutions there are more creative solutions that could be very easy for users or citizens to start uptaking. And I think that it's really important to try and keep looking for those and drive adoption of them. And in terms of another thing that is I think low-hanging fruit in terms of something that would be impactful and neglected is that at least in the US, and I assume in many places, there's a rather large disconnect between the expectations of people working on these technologies and the people who are talking about regulating them. In San Francisco, people talk about having 90% of white-collar jobs being replaced in roughly 3 to 5 years. And in Washington, D.C., you'll hear a 20% odds that in 15 to 20 years, we see something like that. And these people in San Francisco, these aren't people in marketing who are saying this. These are some of the smartest researchers I've literally ever talked to. And they will tell you, like, oh, here's a list of the 50 things that I think I could do to take existing models and get them to solve general logic problems or solve math or things like that. And these people have compelling arguments, and they will say, each of these things has a 2% chance, but I have 25 of them. And they can plot the binary distribution and tell you, like, OK, this is why I think these numbers are so high. And it's not really clear to me, other than, honestly, what the UK government has been doing. They've been doing a great job of thinking about how you deal with this kind of longer-term paradigm-shifting change. But I'm also here because I think Singapore has been very much thinking about what it would look like to address this. And this looks like, I think, making big bets, taking risky assumptions, and building technology that would address or integrate those sorts of capabilities and technologies into society.
I have a last set of questions before I open it up to the floor, so I invite the audience to start thinking about questions. But Evan has really motivated the next section that we want to talk about, right? Even as we try to grapple with the here and now threats, there is a future paradigm, there are future threats emerging, and obviously we need to start preparing for the future. So a question for Leonard and Chris, how do you foresee this landscape of security threats to AI changing in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, here again, I'm not in the best position to answer the question, since I'm not, as I said, a computer scientist and a researcher in threats. I'm more a diplomat. But the way I can answer that question is explaining how diplomacy could help in making these future trends more understandable. And I think there is a good example that was created, a nice diplomatic object that was created decades ago, which is called the IPCC for climate change. It's an international panel of scientists whose role is to inform governments and other stakeholders on the latest findings of science regarding climate change. I think we need something similar for the study of risks associated with AI. And again, the UK initiated a really interesting work. Yes, when you ask this, the scientist Joshua Benshaw to formulate recommendation in a report precisely aimed at looking at scientific findings on risk related with AI. So that's the work we want to continue. We want to bring forward, including during our summit. But we also need to think about the sustainability of this work in the long term. And I think that's a really good mission, really good task for the UN. And I'm glad that the recent global compact precisely decided to create such an international panel of scientists, and I hope that these scientists can also work on the topic of risks and security and safety.
I think we've covered a number of the different cyber threats that we see emerging in AI, and industry bodies like MITRE and others are continuing to update and publish the methods for detecting and recognising certain types of threats. So I think what you can do, which is often what I think about, is making sure that you're acting with speed and urgency in transforming the way that you do cybersecurity. Lots of clients, not necessarily here, but in some parts of the world, are either very low maturity or they're comfortable and content with the systems that they've got, but those systems will not be able to adapt to these new threats at the speed that they need to if you're not having close and continuous engagement with either the vendors that are providing them, but also keeping your eye on the global standards evolution, whether it be NIST or MITRE or others. I think that one of the areas, and Evan mentioned it, and I'm sure, Rod, you'd be very interested in the digital identity topic, and I think that it's probably a topic for another day, but I think it's time that digital identity also gets baked into the internet like we've never seen it before. And there's lots of different initiatives in the European Union, also in my country, to transform the way that we attest and identify ourselves for government-issued credentials, and the way that we share those to onboard applications. All of this identity work leads to the ability for me to identify content that's either real or not, based on a person or a thing that created it, and my trust in that thing or person. So there's a lot. It's not just a threat problem. It's a large data security issue, and so this is the chance to really look at your data security program, make sure that's up to speed, that you can ask your data security team, what does this piece of data get used for? Is it quantum safe? Is it used in AI programs? That's the level of maturity we're going to have to get to, and digital identity will play a big part, in my opinion, in the securing of users in accessing these systems and ensuring that age verification on the internet and fake content that's produced and published to us can have some kind of attestation process around it.
So you've identified some potential solutions. I thought I wanted to, particularly in terms of identity, I wanted to drill down a little bit more with Evan and Rod. Are there any other new promising developments to do with these threats on the horizon? What steps can we take now, even if these technologies are not as mature? How do you then balance the risks with the need to innovate and the space to innovate?
So I tend to be a strong believer in the Swiss cheese model of security, where no layer is perfect, but you hope that you have enough, and the existence of any one doesn't make you overconfident. But I think that in terms of reducing the attack surface that AI systems create, things like evals and benchmarks are useful. Red teaming complements that and is very helpful. I assume many, if not all of you here, have heard of mechanistic interpretability. But if you haven't, this is a really great research area where people are trying to understand why AI systems will give the outputs that they do and how to modify aspects of that. If you want a good starting point, Scaling Monosemanticity is a great paper from Anthropic. If you can't remember that, then just doing a Google search on Golden Gate Claude will absolutely get you there. I think that all of these are really interesting, but the thing that I think is most underrated and probably most high impact is the concept of specification-based AI or quantitative safety guarantees for AI models. This is something that's being advanced by Stuart Russell and Yashua Bengio and Max Tegmark and a bunch of big names in the research field. It's also being advanced by a colleague of mine, David Dalrymple at the UK's ARIA, who's running a program around this. And I think that it's a really compelling direction where the premise is that we have for humans this kind of presumption of innocence, where if a human does a thing, then you have to show bad intent before they could be, before you start having negative impacts on them. For engineered systems, we have absolutely the opposite. A bridge or an appliance or a medication or food is not considered safe until it's proven to be safe. And we've, through a various number of factors that are hard to identify, categorized AI into kind of the former category instead of the latter category, where AI systems don't have to prove themselves to us for us to trust them. We hand that to the user. And I think that the capabilities that AI promises mean that we could, in fact, if capabilities do grow, have an architecture where AI systems don't just act and do what we've asked them to do, but they also have to prove to us that they've satisfied some objective quantitative characteristics that we said any solution should have. And so I think that this is a really compelling direction, and I'm excited to see more investment and more research efforts in this.
Specifications and mechanistic interpretability.
So we're finishing here with promising developments, yep. And there's a slight danger in asking a securocrat to talk about that, to give it a rousing end, because by nature we're often pessimists. But actually, when it comes to the technology as a whole of AI, I declare myself as an optimist. And when you see the benefits that this technology is going to be bringing, adding billions of pounds to the UK economy alone in the next few years, its application in all sorts of things from health, transport, is incredibly exciting. And obviously, there are the security risks that we've been kind of focused on and talking about today. Promising developments. I think what I would say is that we're having the conversation now, and that we've got the international engagement. We haven't got all the answers, but this is a really fast-changing technology. The important thing is that we mentioned the summit in France. We've got these things that are bringing us together. The minister mentioned what Singapore has been doing. So although I feel like, yes, to some extent, when you have a new technology like this, and particularly one of this complexity, it's daunting. All we can do is be in a position to be tackling that problem in a joined-up fashion. The UK hosted our summit at Bletchley Park. I went there with my family quite recently. I advise all of you to do it if you make it to the UK. And one of the things that struck me there was a letter from the head of that organisation in about 1942, during the height of the Second World War, where I'm paraphrasing it, so bear with me, but it was effectively saying what we did in 1941 is no longer going to work. We're going to have to kind of tear the organisation up. We're going to have to reshape it because this technology is just growing. It's exponential for what we're going to have to do in terms of kind of breaking codes. So let's get on and do that. And by the way, that's not going to work for 1943. We're going to it gave me some heart that you think, well, actually, that feels like that is sort of all I think you can do in these circumstances is say. Let's work with what we've got. Let's have those conversations and do what we can now. But let's also recognise that we're going to have to keep that conversation going as the technology develops.
Thank you. I will open the floor to questions. There are mics still be running around.
While people think, I also wanted to add, another thing I'm hopeful about is the concept of flexible hardware-enabled guarantees. There's the question of having an IPCC for AI or an IAEA for AI, and I think that there's a compelling idea that's being advanced by Yoshua Bengio about the idea of having the role of the nuclear inspector scaled down and encoded to a chip that you can put on GPUs themselves. And basically, the goal of government would be to get all of the manufacturers to get together and understand the risks that would be posed if we don't have transparency around what AI systems are being developed on what timescale and with what capabilities. But if you had this small thing that was designed standardized, you can make it very easy for people to have general awareness of what capabilities might be showing up and how to deal with them, which I think is a very interesting direction.
Any questions from the floor? I have a list on Slido, but I always prefer the audience interactions. Staring match begins. Okay, I blink. So the question around why AI safety is more well known than AI security, and how do we bring the two together? Anybody? Why do we talk about the safety summits versus the security summits? Yeah.
I don't make it to the security summit. I don't get invited to the security summits, so I'm curious what sorts of things get discussed. What falls under AI security that wouldn't fall under safety? I think these are somewhat ambiguously defined terms.
Yeah, so both of these elements are important, right? But they are so intrinsically linked, I think. So as you say, what I think we need to do is make sure that we're taking a holistic approach. So we're looking at all of the things that we want to cover with this. So I think. Again, there's a risk with the terminology, isn't it, that it becomes very confusing. But I think in order to have confidence that you can use AI safely, you need to have confidence that it's also secure. So in my mind, the difference would be something like the example that Evan used around how easy it is now to kind of fake someone's voice. That to me is around safety. So that is around a tool that has a potential application that could be used to kind of use an AI to conduct a malicious act against someone. The security angle for me is more around again where you don't have confidence that the system itself is secure, and therefore, so for example, the data poisoning, I would put it more into security of AI. So where the model itself, whether maliciously or non-maliciously, has been spewing out things that you have low confidence in. But that terminological debate, to me, is also proof that there's a risk sometimes where you can really put people off the conversation by getting too mixed up in it. And that's why I say I think you need to have a kind of holistic approach overall.
Does it seem fair to say that the security versus safety threat model seems fundamentally different, where the security threat model is someone trying to get to the model to change it, and safety is doing bad things with the model. And in those cases, the conversation, separating the conversation might make a lot of sense, because you would do different things to address different risks if your security model is fundamentally different.
I think it helps me to consider these two dimensions, and you might call it safety or security. That might tie directly to an outcome, where safety could be the end result of a decision go bad for the application of AI. I mean, to me, it's the governance piece, which is a lot about explainability, bias, and compliance. So that's where the regulatory side comes in. And if you can guarantee those things, there's some assurance that what gets produced at the other end is trustworthy, and that can be more softly linked to a safety outcome. But everything cyber is above that. It's the data, it's the models, it's the attacker's perspective, and the way to mitigate, detect, respond, protect, detect, and respond, and recover from incidents that have been caused by an attack on a system. So I think it helps me to think of governance and cyber as augmenting requirements implemented with different capabilities.
My sense is it really allows us to appeal to two different crowds, and there is clearly some overlap, but the union of the spaces probably helps get us a more comprehensive answer.
So the way we see it in France would be that security is mostly about confidentiality, integrity, availability of your AI, whereas safety is more about preventing misuse, malicious use, or dysfunction. But of course, there are overlaps between the two domains, and I agree that we need to have a holistic approach to the topic. So because we were a little bit coward and we didn't want to engage in that discussion ahead of the summit, we decided to rebrand our work into Trust in AI. And Trust in AI, that's the result we want to obtain through security, through safety, but at the end of the day, what matters is trust in AI. And we also thought that labeling a discussion around safety and security that could scare some stakeholders and prevent them of being on the front foot of the discussion, whereas the discussion about trust is by definition more inclusive.
So I'll get to the next question. How do you encourage private-public partnerships to increase security, safety, trust of AI?
My general take is that there's very little reason for a company to pursue a thing if they don't see a high expected value impact on bottom line. They have responsibility to shareholders, in fact, to not pursue highly speculative things, but there's a lot of things that should be done to improve security or improve safety or just improve our understanding of what is possible, how to do things, how to improve capabilities that we're excited about. And many of those things are very speculative. And I view public-private partnerships as the best way to incentivize, really change the incentive landscape fundamentally, to make some of these things incentivized and compelling goals to pursue that companies can pursue with governments.
I think from a regional perspective, and being from a US company, of course, IBM, and being a company that was acquired for our technology, being an Australian company, I mean, I like the way that the United States looks at challenges and invites technological innovation to address those challenges and make commitments, maybe underpinned by an executive order or whatever, and it gets parts of the standards, and there's collaboration there. That's all public-private partnership instantiated by the direct relationship between the government and technological leaders. My general observation and my personal view is as we drift further and further away from the epicenter of the largest technological consumer in the world, which is the US government, there's a gap that kind of gets established between the policymakers and the technological teams that are innovating. And I think the challenge for these countries is to close that gap by ensuring that technological innovation is brought closer to the people who are considering policies, that the policies make sense from an executable perspective. It's probably not as big an issue in Europe because of the size of your economies, but I think that's a challenge here: is for policymakers and governments to show that kind of respect to those companies that are on the forefront of innovation, and invite them for their ideas to participate in interoperability events or demonstrations that show the art of the possible. So I think that's something that a barrier that will need to be overcome in time in order for good policy to be created.
Completely agree with this approach. Just giving an example based on our experience in the EU. So you may know that we recently passed the EU AI Act. But we wanted this regulation to be business-friendly, and the only way to have a business-friendly regulation is to consult with the private sector. So now the Commission has launched the work around the code of practice aimed at implementing this new regulation, and it has launched a multi-stakeholder consultation around the code of practice. So there will be the possibility for stakeholders, including the private sector, to contribute to co-construct the norms that will be applicable in the EU, and we think that's the way to go in order for a regulation to remain business and innovation friendly.
Yeah,
I
I agree with what's been said. I talked about how calls for views are sort of central to the approach that we're taking in the UK. That allows you to do some of that co-constructing that Lina was talking about, where that you don't want to sit in your kind of government ivory tower and do things that are going to have a really negative and unintended consequence. So that's really essential that you create those fora. I think partly it's around the language and narrative we're using on AI as well. And again, I think we try not in the UK to be. The panel yesterday was around the balance between innovation and security, and I think there was that thing of. Actually, it's not about a balance; it's about having both. And you're trying, therefore, to work with industry to work about how this sort of is going to be delivering the benefits without the risks. And it's great for us in the UK that we've got so many AI unicorns and startups and a kind of thriving industry. That's a really positive thing. So yeah, it's essential that we create those spaces for that co-construction, that cooperation.
Chris earlier talked about the rest of the world. So there was a very specific question around how do you secure AI that is built by non-Western countries, non-Western systems?
I'm sorry, the question was?
How do you secure AI systems that are built by non-Western countries?
Well, I mean, how do we secure any system that's non-Western countries? I mean, there's all sorts of challenges with language and culture, and we found ways to ensure that delivering technology has the kind of support that we need for those countries to consume the content. So, as I've kind of said before, I mean, this technology is different, but it's in many ways the security aspects and the way that this technology is delivered is no different to what we've done in the past. It's moving at a speed that's different. So we do have some challenges between where innovation in security, which for your topic you talked about, innovation needs to happen in security, continue to keep up to date with the new innovation. But I guess the challenge is ensuring that as you deliver these technological solutions, you also close the gap to provide the support needed for this technology to be consumed by any party that a company may want to engage with, and that requires internationalization, language. In AI, it might be models that have been created in the local industry and being used in local industry. But these matters are things that we've kind of been delivering since the dawn of IT. So I don't see any barriers per se as to how this technology can be used. Some organisations may want to use it for good, and some may use it for bad. That's a responsibility that they will have in the way that they use the technology. And a responsibility for us is to ensure we provide the capability for it to be used in the way that they want it to be used, and in compliance with the laws of the country by which we'd be providing this technology to.
I think that this is a global. So I don't think there's any country that isn't looking and concerned about securing AI. So I don't think it breaks down in that way. So when you have things like the Bletchley Park Summit, that's not a purely. We've got an engagement from a number of international partners. The same true this week, right? Where we sit in Europe, but we're here having conversations with lots of people from all different parts of the world, because this is a shared problem. And as I said, earlier, no nation, no matter how small or big, but that's also true of any region. You can't solve these problems by sort of only working in sort of one part of the world or with one sort of area. So I think, of course, there will always be different priorities and different approaches. But I think this is an area where it's absolutely right that we are having a genuinely global and international conversation.
If you ask the question about quantum computers or hardware that was powerful enough to do certain things, it might be a different answer. But AI is a software solution, so it follows the parameters of previous software innovations.
Evan?
I think AI is interesting because we tend to treat it as an inscrutable black box where you either need to trust it, and you probably do that by embedding some of your philosophy and values into it. This is the alignment problem, as it's referred to in the safety field. I'm growing increasingly skeptical that alignment is actually possible. For instance, my preferences probably shift from between now and 2 days from now, and it's not clear that we as a group of panelists would even have a coherent set of preferences that you could embed into an AI system. And instead of treating a system as a black box and having to trust it to make decisions that you've sort of abdicated control to, autonomy to, instead you could have checks and validation outside that black box, in the same way that you have checks and validation when you, as an organization, contract with another organization. You build up some specification of what you want, and then the contract is you get the other entity to build the thing that you've specified, and you do a lot of validation to make sure that your specs are right, and then there's some verification that those specifications are in fact met by the things delivered to you. And so I think that if we talk about a paradigm where you have to take your values and your preferences and encode them into an AI system, then these things become vectors for ideologies. And you very quickly end up in a world where people are trying to advance they're trying to achieve superintelligence first because they want their ideology to be something they can export to the world. And I think this is just generally a bad direction to go down. And if instead we say, no, we'll achieve control by putting checks and balances outside, we'll do validation, we'll do verification of outputs of AI, treating it like a black box that you don't necessarily trust in the same way you wouldn't necessarily trust a contractor or an import from some other country, but you still integrate it into your systems because you understand what is happening at the interface. And if you can trust that, then you can trust these systems more holistically. So again, I guess that turned into another plug for specification-based AI or this guaranteed safe AI, but I really do think it's a compelling direction.
The top-rated question now is the one that I've been avoiding, which is, what is the role of the chief AI officer in addressing security risks, apart from moderating panels? Any suggestions from any of you before I take a stab at it too?
The role.
What is the role of a chief AI officer? I guess I have to answer this question. I guess the role is, given how there are many stakeholders, I thought I was a moderator. I guess given the fact that there are many different stakeholders in this process, right? I think that the job of anybody who is entrusted with looking at any technology or any system holistically is then the question of bringing people together, right? So bringing people together so as to deal with the Swiss cheese issues that arise from the incompleteness of any particular system, the need for a more holistic sense of trust that comes from a broader approach, both within an organization as well as internationally. So I guess bringing people together is the first one. The second one, of course, is really to encourage that the system goes a lot faster. And that's something that you guys have talked a lot about, right? So how do you take a much more action bias, despite the fact that there is a lot of uncertainty in the field, despite the fact that not all the methods are done, despite the fact that you need to co-create with many parties. So how do you go fast? I think the third thing that I try to do is to take a longer-term view, right? So how do you go a bit further, looking beyond the immediate challenges, the immediate solutions, but encouraging capacity building, encouraging research, so that we can explore and meaningfully integrate some of the very wonderful things that someone like Evan has talked about, right? Whether it's specifications, whether it's systems, or any new promising directions of research. So
sounds to me like a role that's going to be around for a period and then be consumed, I would hope, by an organisation as AI permeates its way through the organisation. I think that the struggle is if not everybody has bought into understanding and knowing what AI is and its implications on their role, then you may need a chief AI officer in order to have that impact in a shorter period of time, and to start to understand the proliferation of AI across the organisation, discover what's being done already, and start to engage with those, heritage chief data officers and others who may not be familiar with the new risks that these things bring. But I think, did we have a chief internet officer? Did we have a chief Y2K officer? I mean, how many chiefs do we want? But it sounds like it's a helpful role in order to manage the uplift of knowledge and awareness, and then capability for addressing AI as a positive growth program, and also communicate that. And the CISO would be one stakeholder for that education, I would have thought.
I would add to that I do think that bringing people together is a big piece of it, and the other part will be helping those people understand what preferences they have about how things work. I love the interpretation of the phrase "all men are created equal" from American founding documents is like, or interpreting it as humans are equal in their ability to have preferences and the legitimacy of those preferences. And I think that this is something that AI doesn't automate away, the fact that humans have opinions. And if you have N people and you give them a bunch of options and you say, the group now has a preference about these options, you have a lossy compression that you're doing by a factor of N. And there are a bunch of different ways you can do that. You can use voting, you can use markets, you can use ranked choice voting, you can have representatives, but all of those things are going to lose some information, and figuring out what information you're okay losing and having building a process that incorporates people's perspectives on that is something that I hope remains a very human and very valuable skill that people have and bring to the table when we talk about governing anything, including AI technology.
I'm looking forward to the day that this job can go away because AI is so pervasive, and so it goes on the path of.
Then you'll have the chief
internet
quantum officer.
Exactly.
And then
we're done with this, so I can carry on with my life. And to do that, a big part of this is really capacity building, right? How do you build capacity across the system so that people not only know how to deal with the benefits, but also to deal with the security risks? So I wanted to ask you, and it comes up from a question from Slido, which is really about what are the expertise that's required, both at the top end as well as the broad base, in terms of building, doing secure AI. Right? How do you, what do we need to train up both our experts as well as the general population in thinking about securing AI?
Well, if I can start with the international perspective,
Yep.
It all comes back to having a global discussion on the topic, and not only a discussion for the happy few. And for instance, if you look at this very good initiative that has been taken by a handful of countries, which is to create a safety institute. These are still maybe 10, 15 countries having this institute. So we must already think about ways to transfer that knowledge to countries who are not equipped yet with the ability to evaluate advanced AI systems, but also in the long term to be able to give a maximum of countries the ability to equip themselves with this kind of capabilities. So we are just at the beginning of the discussion, but we really think that the discussion should be made global as soon as possible and not remain in the hands of a minority. And we're really happy about the fact that also in the Global Digital Compact, it was decided to create a global AI dialogue where specifically this kind of topics could also be addressed.
I'll have to say a couple of things. So, so the question has many different layers to it. So partly when you're talking at the kind of baseline technical skills, it fits into a wider problem that we have in the UK, and I think is basically true in every country of the world, which is that there are not enough people qualified in kind of computer science and who have the requisite digital skills we need. A few weeks ago, we published our annual labour market survey that has some detail on exactly where the size of the delta, and it's large. So partly there is work incumbent on us all to get more people into kind of technical careers, and a particular challenge for us is to get more women and girls into technical careers, because that's where we have the biggest problem. Within government, there's also then a level, I think, of, and this is where again I imagine your role in part as well as a chief AI officer. It's about making sure that there is an angle thinking about this that is being fed into wider conversations that are happening across the board. That was one of the sort of reasons and rationale behind the creation of the department I work in, of Science, Innovation, Technology. We're only about 18 months old. We're not as old as ChatGPT. So that's partly around creating a department whose job is therefore to be, whatever you want to term it, kind of champion, but to be applying a lens that is thinking about AI, other emerging technologies, and what that means. And then I completely agree with what Janil was saying around kind of the international dimension and about making sure this is not the preserve of the few.
One thing we did at IBM, which is kind of interesting, I'm not plugging the company, but we're an AI company, we've got Watson X. So what our CEO asked us all to do was to participate in a project. So all employees, 300,000 employees, had to form teams, and you came up with a solution to a problem. Now our team built a prompt shield, which was a way to monitor traffic from an untrusted system to an AI model and to understand whether it was drifting from a cyber perspective. So we did that as a group. And I think there's a lot of talking about AI. I don't think everyone understands how it works, and until you actually see how it works, and it doesn't matter whether you're a lawyer or an accountant or a technical person or a cyber person, until you see how one of these systems actually gets put together in a practical way, you can't form your own opinion as to how you counter that from the role that you work in. So perhaps a chief AI officer might do something like that to raise the general awareness of AI and its impact on any role in an organisation. And from a cyber perspective, of course, people who worked in cyber came up with all manner of ideas as to how they would extend their threat management programs to include vulnerability management. The developers start thinking about how DevOps needs to be extended to ensure that the ML models that they're using are trustworthy or known. So all innovation can kind of form from the ground up out of an activity like that. Over a short period of time, of course, people receive prizes. We probably trained our systems pretty well, given that amount of data. I didn't win. I was disappointed. I was wondering if AI was deciding who won, because I was trying my best to influence the judges. But yeah, I did. But yeah, that was one thing IBM did, which was magnificent in terms of the general lift in our salespeople's understanding of what AI is, right through to the HR folks, etc. So just something your organisations might want to consider as well.
I will start wrapping up. Maybe I'll ask each of you to give really your last few words on advice on what we should do. What's most important for you? What do you want us to go away from today's panel with? Anyone?
So again, what I go back to, one of the things I said at the start is around, so multiple things. Looking across the entire AI lifecycle, recognizing that this is not just about those developing the technology. This is around everything from developers, systems operators, end users, that has multiple different people involved. So this is a kind of really, again, it's complex, and so that creates real challenges. But I think we have to kind of embrace it. And again, in particular, then that's true organizationally. it's true systemically, and it's true across borders as well. So again, continuing that conversation at events like this and in France next year to be working across boundaries in how we tackle the problem.
Well, I'd say we need to look at three things in the future when it comes to AI security. The first one is to have a science-based discussion on risks, informed by practice, by governments and the industry, of course. Then we need to see the emergence of truly common standards on how to regulate AI security. And of course, we need shared solutions to be made available to all, so including open source solution in order to mitigate that risks. And these three goals will be at the heart of the summit in Paris next February, and I hope we can continue today's fascinating discussion there.
I'm going to build on the advice that the gentlemen have provided already, but the one focus that I would say that's going to be a good investment in the future is getting your arms around your data and focusing really on data security. Like I said, privacy has been the main driver. But unless you know where all your data is, who's the custodian of the data, and what it's being used for, you can't really start to intersect it with AI models and understanding what AI is used in those systems. You won't be able to do quantum assessments, which will be required in the future once systems for quantum safe. So an investment in the future is really, for me, an investment in data security in this domain. And I'd encourage that if that's on your plate, that's a priority in the short term for a good return in the future, not something that'll just be reduced in value over time.
And my advice is probably a little bit divergent from what's been said so far. Hopefully it's complementary and interesting. I would say that given that all of you are experts and practitioners in a relevant domain that is, we're here for talking about AI, there's clearly some, at least frothiness, if not a bubble. And in that scenario, there will always be amplification of caricatures. The things that you see when you look and read about the areas where you're experts, try to find the caricatures of those perspectives and understand that when you look out at other perspectives that might disagree with yours, this is partly because I come from a place that's full of very caricaturized perspectives around the SF doomer or the AI accelerationist. The things that are getting really amplified from those perspectives are caricatures of very smart, very reasonable people, to the extent that all of you are very smart, reasonable people, but I can probably find caricatures of your roles and the opinions that people in your roles have. And so I would say there's the media incentives are not to convey nuance of important perspectives to you necessarily, but they are out there for you to find. And I'm sure that if you look for that nuance, you'll be able to find it. And I think that a lot of that has been really missing every time there has been and is currently missing because there is a bubble in this AI field.
So thanks to all four of you. Maybe I'll just have some concluding remarks about what I've heard today. I thought it's been a fascinating discussion, so thank you very much. Firstly, it was geeky. We had some conversations around very technical specifications, around systems approaches. We went down some rabbit holes, so I thank everyone for that. I think understanding the science, understanding the technology is going to be a critical part of how we confront these very difficult challenges moving forward. So the need for expertise, I think, comes about from that. I think that geekiness brings up that need for expertise quite clearly. So I think having many people in the room to do that will help. Secondly, I think there was a lot of conversations around the global nature of this. Leonard in particular, thank you for multiple reminders that this is something that needs to be done internationally to bring in multiple stakeholders and the work of the different institutes. I think it's critical for that. I also think that it's critical to bring in multiple organizations, right, and multiple stakeholders. I think that global approach, whether it's at the UN or within each country, is going to be important. If nothing else, because as Evan reminds us, this is a Swiss cheese problem and it's a problem of trust. And so having many people into the room will make a huge difference. And then the third G, of course, is growth, right? This is growth in terms of capacity building for the wide base of the population. It's also growth in terms of preparing for the future, right? So geekiness, globalness, and growthiness. And I think together, despite all the negativity and the pessimism that cybersecurity folks tend to have, I actually heard a lot of optimism and hope that despite the challenges that come from securing an AI system, on balance, there are much opportunities from this, and this is something that if we work on it together with a longer-term perspective, it's something we can tackle together. So thank you very much for the panel. I think we had a fascinating discussion.
Thank you.
And we have come to the end of the panel discussion. I'd like to thank our panelists, moderator, for their insightful comments. This has been an exciting conversation, and I'm sure the panelists have given us all a lot to reflect on about the challenges of securing AI and our roles in this space. And of course, at this juncture, I'd like to invite our moderator and panelists back to their seats. Thank you. Now, thank you to the audience as well for your active participation. Don't go anywhere just yet, because in a short while, we'll be moving on to our next exciting segment, our prize giving ceremony. So stay in your seats, please. Thank you. And now, our next session will be a prize-giving ceremony for the 2024 Global Challenge for Safe and Secure LLMs Track 1, co-organized by the CyberSG R&D Program Office and AI Singapore. And now, may I invite Dr. Chia Chien Wei, Chief of Staff, CyberSG R&D Program Office, to provide an overview of the next segment. Dr. Chia, please.
Well, thank you very much, Wayne. Good morning to everyone. This global challenge is launched with a critical mission to tackle one of the most pressing concerns in AI: jailbreaking attacks on LLMs through prompt engineering. These attacks exploit vulnerabilities in LLMs, bypassing safety measures and causing the models to generate harmful or undesirable content. Through this challenge, we invited participants from around the world to contribute their innovative ideas to both expose these vulnerabilities and pave the way for stronger defenses. The competition is divided into two tracks. Track 1, Attack. Participants design automated approaches to craft prompts that trigger undesirable responses from fine-tuned LLMs. Track 2, Defense. Participants will develop non-tuning-based measures to defend LLMs against advanced jailbreaking attacks. Today, we are here to celebrate the outstanding achievements of the teams who have pushed the boundaries of AI security in Track 1. A total of 111 teams comprising 314 individuals around the world took part in this challenge. The diversity in participation was remarkable, with teams from Germany, China, Singapore, Japan, and Malaysia. The level of effort, creativity, and innovation displayed throughout is inspiring and something we should honor. So let's give the prize and the participants a round of applause, please. Thank you. The goal of Track 1 was to test the resilience of LLMs by identifying and exploiting vulnerabilities. Track 1 was further divided into two phases, Track 1A and Track 1B. In Track 1A, teams were tasked to develop automated methods to elicit 50 predefined malicious behaviors from popular LLMs. This included a variety of challenging scenarios, such as triggering methods to generate offensive language, promote violence, or review sensitive information. Out of the 111 teams, 32 teams managed to surpass the baseline benchmark. In August, Track 1A came to a close, and the top 9 teams advanced to Track 1B. The challenge for this phase was increased further. The teams were given 35 additional prompts, malicious behaviors to target, but only one of the 3 victims' models was disclosed. The remaining 2 models were hidden to induce uncertainties aimed at forcing participants to grapple, adapt, and innovate in order to win. In that sense, the top 3 teams who rose to the challenge and truly stood out in Track 1B demonstrated incredible skills and creativity. Their submissions showcase a deep understanding of LLM vulnerabilities and the ability to systematically attack models that has been designed to resist various manipulations. Now, without further ado, may I now hand the event back to Wayne for the prize giving. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chia, for that overview. And now, the moment we have been waiting for, the announcement of the top 3 teams from Track 1B. May we now invite Ms. Yong Ying Yi, Chairman of the Central Provident Fund Board and also Senior Advisor at the Ministry of Digital Development and Information, and also Chairman at SG Innovate, to present the awards. Ms. Yong, please. We're going to start with 3rd place. Now, 3rd place goes to Team Model Crackers, represented by Dang Zhe Sing. Congratulations. Well done. And 2nd place goes to Team Safety LLM A-Star, represented by Chen Yiming. Big smiles for our camera. Great job. And now, 1st place goes to Team Deep Attack, represented by Liu Hanjing. Fantastic job, and now we'd like to invite the winners for a group photo, please. We'd also like to invite Deputy Chief Executive, Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, Mr. Chua Kwan Sia, to join them for this photo. All right. Let's have a big smile for the camera, holding your awards proudly. One more big smile. Well done. Let's give a big round of applause to all our winners and participants for their hard work and innovation. And thank you so much to Ms. Yong for handing out those awards. But the journey does not end here. As we conclude Track 1, we are already looking forward to the next phase of the Global Challenge, Track 2. Now, Track 2 will run for 7 weeks from January to February 2025. More details will be shared in due course. Once again, to our audience, thank you so much for your active participation and thoughtful questions throughout this session. We hope that today's discussion has been informative and inspiring for you as well. We'd like to once again congratulate our winning teams for Global Challenge for Safe and Secure LLMs Track 1. And of course, thank you once again to Ms. Yong for your time for the prize-giving ceremony. Now, do note that this session will be available on demand on the SICW website, so feel free to revisit this session at your convenience. Now, our next session will be at 1 p.m., the HLP Quantum session titled Trust and Security in the Quantum Era. Thank you so much, have a good day, and we'll see you later at 1 p.m.